Hello everyone, it's Deb again. So in this video, I am going to show you guys how I make homemade Mexican wedding cakes, also called Russian tea cakes. And they're not actually cakes, they are cookies. They're little hard, not super hard, but they're the shortbread cookies with pecans in them. And they're not they're not like oatmeal cookies or anything. And when you bite into them, they crumble. So it's that kind of a consistency. And the recipe that I use is out of my old Betty Crocker cookbook. This is about 20 years old, and this is the recipe that I use for Russian tea cakes. And I did modify it, so it's not quite exactly the same, but it's very close. And that beep that you just heard was my oven. I got it heating up to 400 degrees here. These are really simple, but they take a little bit of time, and so I don't make them very often because they're kind of a hassle, but I do love them a lot. And I'm using all organic ingredients. This is my butter. That's 1 cup of butter. I've got flour here from Azure Standard. It's the all-purpose flour. And then I also get my pecans from Azure Standard. And this is a vanilla that I made with organic vanilla beans and organic alcohol, and it actually steeped for about 8 years. So this is really super strong. And then you've got your powdered sugar. For some reason, I've got 2 open bags of powdered sugar. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but it requires powdered sugar in the batter, in the dough, and also they are coated with powdered sugar. So I'll use this one in the dough, and then when I go to toss the baked cookies in powdered sugar, I will use this one from Florida Crystals. They're both good brands. I like them both. And so that's already heated up, and this is softened. The butter has to be softened. Which is hard to do in the winter because it's so cold in the house. And so I do set it up on the oven when it's preheating, or I'll put it on one of my radiator heaters out in the garage. So I will set you up over here. I've got my setup attached to my shelf so that you can see what I'm doing over here. And I've got my wireless microphone on, so hopefully the sound is good. So hold on, let me get you set up here. All right, so I've got you set up on my tripod over there on my shelving unit, and this is a really messy job, so I'm going to wear my apron. This is an apron my mom painted for me a long time ago before she passed away, and so this is what I use when I'm making a huge mess. Again, I've got my wireless lavalier mic on there, so hopefully it's not banging around too much. This apron's like one of those one size fits all, so I have to wrap it around me twice. And then I can tie it like that. So again, it's 1 cup of butter, and it's really super soft right now. And so to get all of the butter out of here, I usually use my spatula, rubber silicone scraper, and wipe it all out of there because there's a lot that's stuck to the wrapper right now. So I've got 2 of those. And I use unsalted butter because I add my own salt, and I like being able to control how much salt is in there. And you know what, you guys? I think I'm going to get too hot with this long sleeve shirt on. I may end up having to take this off. Got a tank top underneath. Oh. So this is really super soft, but you need it to be really soft. Of course, I've got butter all over my hands, so I always keep paper towel at the ready so that I can clean up my mess. Oh, That wasn't even enough. It's very messy with all this butter. And then so you put there's a half a cup powdered sugar that you have to put in here and blend with that. And I'm sorry, I don't have the right editing software to be able to speed up these sequences. So you're just going to have to deal with a really long video, I'm afraid. And if the powdered sugar is super clumpy, I put it through a sieve, like a strainer. And I'm not real exact about it. I just stick it in the bag like, some things you have to be exact about when you're baking, but this is not really one of them. So this is a half cup of powdered sugar. And when you do this, you have to be careful because powdered sugar just wants to go floofy and go flying everywhere. And it can make a really huge mess. And so you have to go really slow with it. This is the vanilla. It calls for a teaspoon, which normally I do not measure my vanilla. I just pour in whatever looks good, to be quite honest. But since I'm making a video, I thought I'd actually measure it this time. Wipe off the rim so that it's not running down the side of the bottle. And this is like a Danish dough hook. You'll be able to tell the shape of that. It's called a Danish dough hook, and it's used for making breads and doughs. And it actually works really, really well. And so I'm just very gently going to stir the butter in with the powdered sugar. And if the butter is not soft enough, you won't be able to do this. You won't be able to get the sugar mixed in without making a huge mess. Now that wasn't too bad. Sounds like my neighbors are playing music. So if you hear music, it's not mine. I actually turned mine off for this video. Okay. Probably not going to be able to see that very well. Sorry about the lighting. But once you get it mixed in without it making a big ploof, then you can really start stirring it in. And if you don't have one of these, you can just use like a wooden spoon or whatever you have. You could probably use a mixer, but when you use an electric mixer, you run the risk of making that big ploof of powdered sugar. So I prefer to just mix it by hand like that. And then that's it for that part. And I mix the butter and the sugar in my bigger bowl. And then I mix the flour and the nuts in the smaller bowl, because then you're going to add it to the bigger bowl. And so this is slightly smaller. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to tell, but that's slightly smaller than that one. And the original recipe calls for 2 1/4 cups of flour with 3/4 of a cup of chopped nuts. And I just changed it slightly so that I'm using more nuts. And to properly measure flour, it's good to have a scoop or something to scoop it up into your measuring cup. And I use this to loosen it up, because flour will settle to the bottom of your container. And so I'm just fluffing it up just like this. And I use this is a chopstick, a wooden chopstick. That's what I level off with for my measuring cup. And so to properly measure flour for baking, you should take your measuring cup and scoop it into the measuring cup and let it heap up like that. And then you take either the back of a knife or a chopstick and you just start going back and forth. I wish I could zoom in, but again, I have crappy editing software, so I can't even do that. But you just kind of go back and forth and level it off. I used to use the back of a knife, but then we just got these chopsticks, so now I do that. So that's 1 cup. I'm going to put it in this bowl here, and I'll do another one. See, if you just take your cup and you scoop it in there like that, you're going to be getting a lot more flour in there than is actually probably intended for the recipe, because most people who are making baking recipes like this, they measure their flour in this way. You can also weigh your flour, like if you figured out your perfect recipe, you can go ahead and weigh it, and so that it's consistently the same each and every time. You see how it's mounded up over the thing? So I just start in the middle, I put my chopstick in the middle, and I go down the middle, and then I just go back and forth, just ever so slightly, and it fills in the gaps of the measuring cup. And then I always go away from me for a final thing, so that I'm not like trying to make a mess or anything. So that's 2 cups. And I just bang on the back of the thing. And I do store my flour in the refrigerator or the freezer, wherever I've got the room to do it. And that is to keep out the little moths and weevils, whatever little bugs like to inhabit flour. And so I actually keep that in the secondary fridge out in the garage that we have. And then it is 1/4 teaspoon of salt. This is white Mediterranean sea salt. It's pure white, but it's really, it's very high quality grade. And again, I'm not perfect. I'm just, whatever. It's close enough to 1/4 teaspoon. And so that's it. And I will just use my spoon to mix it in right now. If I was like doing something else, I like to use a wire whisk, because I normally have to add a lot more to this than just a simple 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm usually adding baking soda and baking powder and everything. And to get that evenly distributed, I like to use a wire whisk. But since this was just a little bit of salt, I can just kind of stir it with the measuring spoon that I had. And I'll set that aside. And then the nuts, it calls for finely chopped. Like if you're doing brownies, you don't have to chop them very fine. But these cookies are really small. They're only like about 1 inch. And so you want to chop them up pretty finely so that you're not getting huge chunks of nuts in each bite. You want to have like an even distribution of little tiny pieces of nuts. And this is a 2-pound bag. I buy them by the bulk because it's cheaper that way. And I just keep it in its original bag, and then I put it in a Ziploc bag or a zipper top bag. And then I store these in the refrigerator also so that they don't get rancid. And so I just dump them out on my cutting board, and I use a big chef's knife like that. And they're going to want to fly off of your cutting board. So you kind of have to be careful that you're not flinging pecans all over the kitchen. And I just kind of rock it back and forth. And there is a lot of nuts here, but I don't find that to be problematic. Like, you know, you could go with the recipe and use 3/4 of a cup, but I really like pecans a lot. And because when you're chopping these, the bigger pieces will get smaller, but the smaller pieces are going to turn to dust. Basically, it's going to turn to nut flour. And so the fact that I increased the nuts is really not hurting anything, because by the time I get the batch down to finely chopped nuts, there's going to be quite a bit of nut powder, nut flour left on the cutting board. So it, in gluten-free recipes, they will often use like almond flour, which is just ground up almonds. And so that is a substitute for all-purpose flour. So in this way, I'm not taking anything away. I'm just kind of doing a substitution. So it turns out to be the same amount, cup for cup, as the original recipe, but it just has more nut flour than it does all-purpose flour. Here comes one of my kittens. Hello, Stella. What are you doing, baby? She thinks she wants some water. So yeah, just chop and chop and chop. And I rock it back and forth. I'm holding down the tip of the blade, and my right hand is actually doing all the chopping. I'm just holding the tip of the blade to the cutting board here. And this is very finely chopped. But again, there's going to be some bigger pieces and some little pieces, and then there's going to be dust. So this is, for me, this is what I found to be the best combination for these particular cookies. Well, now I'm making a mess. And so I'm just going to add those to the flour portion. And I'm going to use my spoon to stir it up. There are a few big pieces of pecans, but that's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. I don't want it all dusted. If I wanted to do that, I would just add pecan flour. I mean, I could throw the pecans in the food processor and turn them into flour. That's not the point. But you don't want them to have really huge, big pieces. You're probably not going to be able to tell. Sorry about the bad lighting and everything, you guys. And I know this is going to be a long video. I'm already on 15 minutes for this clip. So just mix it in. Mix the nuts in with the flour really good. And then when you go to add it, you have to add just a little bit at a time and try not to make a huge mess. And so I probably add about a quarter of it at a time. And I'm very gently going to incorporate that flour with that butter and the powdered sugar that's in there. Because I really do try to minimize the amount of mess that I make. And so it's starting to get sandy. I need a camera person, you guys. And before it gets all the way incorporated, I'll go ahead and add in another. I guess that's probably a third. So a third and then another third. I don't think Stella knows what to do. She's just roaming around down here on the floor. Thankfully, she's not on the counter like Luna. Luna likes to get up on the counter. And at some point, if you're not using this this dough hook, it can be really hard to maneuver, and so you just have to start mixing it with your hands at that point, because one of these may not do the trick. If you have a wooden spoon, that might be good enough. See, I'm already getting flour outside of the bowl, because now it's getting fuller and fuller. And kind of hold your hand over the rim, and that can kind of hold things in. Oh, sometimes. And I just bring it up from the bottom, because the flour wants to settle at the bottom. So you just got to bring it up, turn it, turn your bowl, and turn your your utensil at the same time. I really like this Danish dough hook. They're handmade, I think, in Sweden. I think. I can't remember. Handmade somewhere in Europe. Probably Denmark. I mean, that would make the most sense, but I'm not sure if these do come from Denmark. And so at some point, you're not going to see any more flour on the bottom of the bowl. See, it will eventually all pick it up and become one big mass like this. Like that. Very, very, very stiff. Very stiff. And there's no more flour in the bottom of that bowl. So you want to stop right then. You don't want to over mix it because that will make tough cookies. And so once you see that all the flour is off the bottom of the bowl, then you can pretty much stop and just scrape. Oh, see, I'm a very messy cook, you guys. I can't help it. Oh, there's Stella. Hi, you going to talk now, Stella? Yeah. Hello. And I just keep scraping the excess off onto the bowl, on the side of the bowl. And it's usually better to clean this out right away because you don't really want this sitting on there. Sorry, I know this is loud. But for right now, I'm not going to clean this off. But normally I would take this over to the sink and just spray the heck out of it and get all that dough off of there. But I'm going to save you guys the torture of hearing all that. And so it says to shape them in 1-inch balls. And I have these cookie scoops that I use for all various types of cookies. And I have one that's about a 1-inch, but this one, which is the number 40, it's probably more of like a 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 inch because I like to make these a little bit bigger than what they're normally made. And so you're supposed to scoop them out onto an ungreased cookie sheet. These are the cookie sheets that I use. It's got one raised edge here. That's where you grab it from when you're baking. So I actually have 4 of these. And these don't spread at all. These are not like oatmeal cookies or chocolate chip cookies or anything like that. These do not spread. They hold their shape. There's no baking powder. There's no baking soda. So they're not going to rise. They're not going to change their shape at all. And so after you've made sure that all the nuts are mixed in pretty much evenly, you can just take a little bit at a time and you can just guesstimate. I just happen to have a whole set of these because I love to bake, and so that's just my thing. I've got a lot of baking equipment, or I did. I actually got rid of a lot of it because I'm getting ready to go nomadic, but some of this I did keep around for my son to use because he has shown interest in baking. And so I'm just taking it and I'm scooping it and then I'm flattening it. Just like that. I'm just making it even so that it's basically one scoop like that. And then this is just the first part. This is just to portion them out because you do have to further shape them. But because they don't spread, you can put them a lot closer on the cookie sheet than you can when you're making chocolate chip or oatmeal or peanut butter cookies or anything of the like. Because when you make those, you have to leave plenty of area on the cookie sheet for them to spread out as they're baking. So I kind of like these because there's no guesswork. You don't have to guess on how many you can get on the sheet. Normally, if it's a chocolate chip cookies or whatever, I will put 9 on this big of a sheet. I'm not sure how big this is, but I'll put 9 on there. And for this, I can get probably twice as many. But I want them evenly baked on the cookie sheets, so I'm going to do an even number on the 2 baking sheets to start out with. And it's just a little trigger handle. You'll probably hear me. It's a little trigger. I'm just squeezing it, and it's coming right out of there. There's a little, you probably can't see that. There's a little mechanism in there. Yeah, you can't see that. There's a little bar in there that when I squeeze it, it does this little sweeping motion. So you just scoop your dough in there, and then you hold it over the cookie sheet, and you just squeeze the handle several times until it plops out. And I just press it up against the side of the bowl, and that makes a nice flat surface. And the reason why I'm pushing it in there is so that there's no air gaps in the scoop, and so I make sure that each cookie is pretty much the same size, because I'm squeezing out the air on each one, and I know that they're approximately the same size. Like if I was being totally picky, I would be weighing out each one. I would literally get my scale out and make sure each one weighed the same amount. But I'm not doing this as a business right now, so I don't have to worry about that. And this one actually is not full. This did not fill up the whole thing. And I hate it when that happens. I really hate it when that happens. And if it's not an even amount, I just try to scatter them around so that each one is basically, each cookie sheet is basically spaced the same. And yes, my hands are clean. I washed them before I did this. So there's going to be one orphan who's a little bit small. And if I was really wanting to be particular, I'll just take a little bit from each one, a little tiny bit from each of these other ones. I'm just going to have a midget. And so what you do is you just take them. This is what it looks like when it's scooped out. It's a little bit rough around the edges. So you just roll it into a ball like that in between your palms. And it makes a perfect little sphere there. And because they don't spread or anything, I do usually kind of push them down a little bit. But for right now, I'm just rolling each one. Okay. And if there's anything like scattered around, you can kind of pick up the dough. Like there's a little tiny piece of dough right there. So I can just take one of the cookies and just pick that up and roll it in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me finish this one. And I can feel that that one's pretty heavy. So I'm going to take a little bit off of that one and re-roll it and put it on that small midget one and re-roll that one. So any of them that feel heavy, I can take off and add to that little midget one. Sorry about that. But I'm just going to take it and push down just a little bit. So they're not going to be perfect circles, but you don't really want them to be perfect circles because again, they're not sinking, they're not spreading. So you kind of have to form them a little bit on your own because you don't really want them to be perfect spheres. You do want them to have like a little flat bottom, or I do. Like, I guess if you don't want it to be like that, you don't have to. You could keep them in a spherical shape, but personally, I like them to have a little bit of a flat surface to them. And I bake these at the same time, both of the sheets, and then I just rotate the cookie sheets halfway through the cooking time. So I'll put one on the top oven shelf and one on the bottom, and then halfway through the cooking, I will come in here and rotate them out so that they're evenly cooking, or evenly baking. Sorry. But yeah, these are kind of my favorite cookies. I really, really love them. I just don't make them very often because the process, because this is just the first step. After they're baked, you have to coat them. You have to toss these with powdered sugar. And the recipe says to do it 2 times. I actually like to do it 3 times, so it becomes a little bit more of an affair there. Again, I'm just going to smush them down a little bit. A little bit, and they're going to have my little fingerprints on them. That's okay. These are kind of like thumbprint cookies because at this point, you would just make a thumbprint in the cookie and it will bake like that, and you put jam in the center and it will bake up like that. But I'm not doing thumbprint cookies. We're just doing the little Mexican wedding cakes or Russian tea cakes, whatever you want to call them. So my hands are really greasy right now. So for that reason, I usually put gloves on, but I was already halfway through this recipe and I didn't want to stop. So yeah, if you just put those nitrile gloves on right in the beginning before you even start touching the dough, then you won't have to worry about this. I'm not going to wash my hands right now, but I will here in a second. Hopefully I can get most of that off with a paper towel. And it says bake 10 to 12 minutes or until set, but not brown. So you don't want these brown. That's not the point. And then you immediately remove them from the cookie sheet to the wire rack and cool them for 5 minutes before you start coating them. So at about 6 minutes, I'm going to set my timer for 6 minutes and come through and rotate the pans so that they're evenly baking. I'll put one on the bottom, and I'm just going to offset that to the left, and then the one on the top, I offset it to the right, and so they're just kind of staggered right there. And then I will set my timer for 6 minutes. Probably can't see that. So 6 minutes, and then when that's dinging, I'll come in and I'll switch them out and keep cooking for another 6 minutes, or baking, sorry. And then I will get ready to coat them with powdered sugar. So, hold on. Okay, so the timer's getting ready to go off. It's been 12 minutes, and after 6 minutes, I rotated the pans. And so now it's time to take them out of the oven. I took my apron off because it was getting too hot. And that bottom one, it started to get too brown there. They're not supposed to be brown. I think I had my racks too close to the bottom because they're not supposed to be brown. Not sure if you're going to be able to tell that or not, but this side started to get brown. My oven is not very even, so you just immediately get them off onto a cooling sheet, a cooling rack. So yeah, these are a little bit done. I could have gone with a minute less, it looks like. But it's okay. Once they're covered in brown or powdered sugar, you're really not going to be able to tell much of a difference. They might be slightly more crispy than the other ones. Like this sheet was the one that was on top for the last 6 minutes, and they're not brown. So these guys are okay. So they immediately go off onto the wire rack. And again, if I had made these smaller, I wouldn't have had to cook them as long. I could have gone with 10 minutes instead of 12. And in this case, I probably could have gone with even less because those ended up getting too brown right there. So I will set the timer for 5 minutes now, and then I will start coating them with powdered sugar. Hold on. Okay, so it's been almost 5 minutes. The timer's getting ready to go off. And I'm just going to use whatever powdered sugar I had left here in the bag. When you look at the recipe in the cookbook, it doesn't tell you how much powdered sugar to use. That's because it's variable. It's going to depend on how thickly you toss them in, how many times you toss them in powdered sugar. So I'm just using up the rest of that. Sorry, just making sure my microphone was on. So I was just using up the rest of that bag. And then I'm going to get into this other open bag. This is the Florida Crystals. So this is the half-cup measuring cup that I used to measure the powdered sugar the first time. And so I guess that's probably about a cup right there altogether, maybe. But I know that's definitely not going to be enough. But we'll start with that. And this is a little bit tiny clumpy. So I'm just kind of smushing it with my fingers. I guess I could have run it through a sieve. But now these are still very warm. And so I am wearing gloves this time because this is a really huge, messy ordeal. So you just kind of toss them back and forth. The powdered sugar, sorry, I don't know why I keep saying brown sugar. Powdered sugar is not going to stick to the whole surface the whole time, but that's why you recoat them after about 5 minutes. So it's been 5 minutes since I took them out of the oven, and I'm just scooting them around in the powdered sugar and then kind of knocking off the excess. I just kind of take them back and forth from one hand to the other. And you do this while they're warm so that the powdered sugar will end up sticking to it. If you waited until they were cold, the powdered sugar wouldn't really stick to it. Sorry, I have something in my eye. There's Luna. She's not going to be talkative either. She's supervising over there. You just can't see her. And so I've got my cooling rack sitting on a piece of freezer paper because this is really messy. And it's just going to leave a huge, big pile of powdered sugar. And so I've used wax paper and parchment paper. This is just freezer paper that I had sitting around. So I've got that underneath my cooling rack so that the sugar will just fall to that, and it's really easy cleanup. If I didn't have anything like that, I would just make a mess on my countertops and have to clean it up afterwards. I'm used to doing that. I'm running out of sugar, so I'm going to go ahead and add about another half a cup. I've never measured how much I use at this point because, again, it's very different from batch to batch, and it's variable. I just don't worry about measuring how much I need. But I do kind of bounce them back and forth in my hands just because I don't want it to be unevenly coated. Like, I don't want the powdered sugar to be really thick in some areas and thin in the other. And so that's why I kind of just try to make it even. I mean, it doesn't come out perfect, but that's okay. By the third coating, it really does come out perfectly coated. And if you only wanted to do it twice, you could. I'm kind of a perfectionist, So that's just how I roll. I'll have to count these here when I'm done. I'm not sure how many of these it made. But they're going to start getting really cakey. It's going to start absorbing that powdered sugar, and it will just you'll be able to see. Like after 5 minutes, you'll be able to tell. So hold on, I'll get back to you in a minute. All right, so we're coming up on the 5 minute mark that these have been sitting here, and I just wanted to show you can kind of tell that the powdered sugar is absorbing into the cookies, and it's kind of becoming gummy. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to tell by looking at it, but definitely by feel you can tell it's pasty. It's very gummy right now. And the powdered sugar, it looks like I didn't even coat some of them because it's absorbed into the cookies. And again, this only happens when the cookies are hot. We've got a little bit time left. And so I'm going to get my gloves on here and start coating these again. All right, so I've got about 10 seconds left on my timer. I'm going to put my gloves back on. This is a fresh pair of gloves. And I already know that I'm going to need more powdered sugar than I have here in the bowl. And so I'm already prepared for that. That's why I keep the extra just sitting here. And you can just kind of do this a little bit, but if your cookies are big like mine, that's not really going to work. So that's why I just like to roll them around by hand, because tossing them like a saute pan, it doesn't really work when the cookies are too big. And I just do a few at a time. And again, most people would stop after the second coating, but I really like to have a perfectly even coating. And so I usually do 3 times. You don't have to, but you can. You could do it 4 times, but at that point, there's the cookies aren't hot anymore, and they have absorbed as much of the sugar as they can, and so it's really just kind of going overboard. But again, I'm just swishing them around in the powdered sugar, and I'm tossing them back and forth to get the excess off so that it's kind of evenly distributed. And I just work as quickly as I can because they're still warm. This is the best time to get it done. And I know that I'm using too much powder. Well, I'm not using too much, but I need enough powdered sugar in the bowl so that I can scoop them around and dip them and do all that. And so that means that I'm going to have excess in there so that when I'm all done, there's going to be too much in there. But that's okay because I just save it in a container that I keep specifically just for this type of baking so that I can reuse it. But now I'm getting really low on the powdered sugar in the bowl here. And so I'm going to have to go in here and, again, put another half a cup in there. What are we up to? 1.5 cups now? I'm not sure. But whatever's left over, I will save it. I'm not going to throw it away or anything. I'll use it for something else. I'll figure out something else to do with it. But because I like to do this 3 times, I usually don't end up with a lot left over in the bowl. I'm just working as quickly as I can because they're cooling off. And usually after this second coating, by the time I do the 3rd coating, they are pretty much cooled off all the way. But even after that second coating, I'll try to take a picture, but you'll see that, again, it just starts absorbing into the cookie. And I don't know how to describe it. I mean, if you've never really had a really good Mexican wedding cake or Russian tea cake, you may not really know how it's supposed to taste and how it's supposed to feel in your mouth. Like, it's not just the taste, it's the feel. Like, they should literally melt in your mouth. That's what these cookies are famous for doing. If you've done them right, they should just like melt in your mouth. Oh, I'm making a mess, you guys. I forgot to put my apron back on. This is the worst time to forget your apron. But actually, I'm not doing too bad. I'm not getting it too much on. See, I'm wearing black, so that should be a real indicator. Maybe I'm getting neater in my older years. I don't know. All right, so that is the second coating. And now I'm going to time it for 5 minutes again. Timer 2, 5 minutes, start. And then I'm going to do it one more time. All right, so I lied. I am getting messy, so I'm going to have to put my apron back on here. It has been almost 5 more minutes. And so I'm going to go in with the third coat of powdered sugar here. And yes, this is 3 pairs of gloves. Hold on. I normally do not use this many gloves. But if I was doing it in a business setting, of course I would. I would just deal with it. But like normally, I would just wash my hands each time and not have to worry about it. I don't think I'm going to have to add any more powdered sugar this time. There's probably about a half a cup left in there. So again, I'm going to try to add pictures in at each interval. But at this point, I kind of like to do one at a time. And so I'll do one. I'll stick another one in there. While I'm coating one of them, I'll get a next one in there and get it ready. And even after 3 coats, it may not still be perfectly coated. Like, it may still show a little bit of cookie through, but it's okay. Because for the most part, all that powdered sugar has soaked in to those cookies. Just try to work as quickly as possible. Going back and forth. I probably could coat these 4 times, but I'm just not going to be that much of a perfectionist. I think it'll be fine. Well, I know it's fine because I've made these for years and I've only coated them 3 times and they always turn out fine. And I'm really sorry this video is taking so long. I'm sure it's going to be 30 to 40 minutes at this point. But we're going for thoroughness, I suppose. Either that or I just won't upload this video at all. Oh, there goes the powdered sugar. Oh. And whatever's left over, I'll just put in a zip closed bag. I won't say Ziploc because that's not actually the brand I use. You don't want to toss off too much of the powdered sugar because then there's nothing left. But you want to make it so that it's not too super sloppy. And these are really messy. When you eat them, you've got powdered sugar all over your face and all over your fingers. But they're super good. So I put up with the mess. Just kind of multitasking here. Sorry, I don't have a better camera angle. If I had a camera person, they could be standing up above, pointing the camera down into this bowl, and showing you what I'm doing. And of course, on the bottom of cookies, you're going to have these little cross hatches from the cooling rack. That's, you know, that's just something you got to deal with. Unless for the very last time you wanted to set them on parchment paper or wax paper, then you could probably avoid those little crossbars on the bottom, cross hatches. These are one of the only cookies that you can actually ship and get it to your destination and have it be enjoyable by the recipient, because they're not going to get like stale or anything. They're already a hard cookie. It's not like an oatmeal cookie or a chocolate chip cookie that it's going to get stale. And actually, as I'm standing here, I can see that a few of them are still showing a little bit of the cookie. And so I'm going to kind of just push that powdered sugar onto that. And I can kind of smush it around. I mean, I don't want too much on there, but I want enough. So there's a very fine line between too much and not enough. So even after all that, I can still go in here, and I've got plenty of sugar left in the bottom. So I can do this. I can just go through and kind of sprinkle some on the top and smush it in. But again, going back and forth to get the extra off so that it's not too awfully messy. But I guess it just depends on how much sugar you want on your cookies and how much of a perfectionist you are. But yeah, I'm lying. I'm actually I'm going to keep coating until I'm happy with these. And you are still going to see a little bit of the cookie through it. There's just no way around it. You can't get a perfect coating unless you're maybe doing it in a factory. I mean, I'm sure that there's some way that they can get a perfect amount. I don't like factory-made cookies. I like my own homemade cookies. And because I've got all this sugar left in the bottom of the bowl, there's no reason for me to not keep coating them. I could just keep doing this until they won't accept anymore. Because right now they're still accepting more. If the cookie is still warm, it will still take on more sugar. And if you've already got it in the bottom of your bowl, well then there's really no reason to not use it up. Unless you just don't have the time, I guess. But yeah, this is my Mexican wedding cakes recipe, or Russian tea cake, whatever you want to call them. Basically a shortbread butter cookie with pecans in them and tossed with powdered sugar. That's all they are. I don't know why they call them cakes, to be honest, because they're not cakes. They're cookies. But whatever. We're going with the vernacular. In Germany, these are very similar to German. It's called Pfeffernussen. Pfeffer is pepper, and Nussen is nuts. And so they will actually put a little bit of pepper in the dough. And I've never actually made that, so I don't know how it tastes. But I think that they are pretty similar to what I'm doing here. I guess you could say I'm coating these like 4 times, 3 to 4 times. It just depends. I could keep going and going. As long as it keeps sticking, I can keep going until they're totally cooled off. And then again, at that point, they probably won't they just won't accept any more powdered sugar at that point. And I'm sure the automated factories, they have probably machinery that does this multiple times in very, very large quantities. So I'm just kind of trying to replicate that here at home, using my hands instead of machines. And so at the end of this video, I will post one more picture, one or two more pictures, just so you can see how it all looks at the end. But I'm pretty stingy. I don't want to waste this sugar, so that's why I keep standing here doing this, even though I should have stopped a long time ago. I'm going to keep doing this because I don't want to waste this sugar. I could hold it over for another batch, but I honestly, I don't know when I'll be making these again. So for practical purposes, I would just rather use everything that's in my bowl here rather than to have to try to save it for another day. They're all looking really coated at this point, to be honest. I probably am going to have a little bit of waste here at the bottom, because there's so little left that I'm probably not going to want to save it. That's why I'm just like double, triple, quadruple dipping them at this point, because I don't want to have to save that little tiny piddly amount of powdered sugar that's in the bottom of the bowl. So I just roll it around and smush it in. This is not good for people on a diet, I'm sure. But it's not like I eat a lot of these at one time. You know, I'll probably eat 2 of these at one time. So if this was just me eating this, it would take a week or 2 just to get through this whole batch. But since it's my son and I eating them, they'll probably be gone within, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. He loves my baking. He is a growing kid, and he loves his mama's baking. Got kind of a sweet tooth. These will be gone in no time. All right. And if there's too much on it in one area, you can kind of rub that off. You don't have to leave it caked on in one area unless you want to. And then you can. But these are way bigger than the Archway cookies. I think that's the brand Archway. They have packages of Mexican wedding cakes. My mom used to love these, and she loved Archway cookies. But they were probably half the size of these guys. They were really tiny. But yeah, that's it. I don't think I can get any more to stick to it. I'm pretty much out of powdered sugar here. So we're going to call them done. And when these are totally cooled off, then I will keep them in a little storage container that's airtight so that it's not taking up any kind of moisture that might be in the air. That's pretty much it. I almost used all of that. I think that was about 1.5 cups of sugar. I'm not sure. Again, you don't really have to measure it. You just keep adding it until you don't need any more. And that's about how much you need. All right, you guys. I hope you have had a good holiday and have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I will talk to you later. Bye.